Hey there, I'm Brian Kachejian from ClassicRockHistory.com, and today I have the only man who has ever sat behind the drum seat in one of the most legendary, influential, and greatest rock bands of all time, Mr. Ian Paice. It's a pleasure to meet you today.
Hello, man. How are you?
All right, I'm doing pretty
Good to
good.
be here.
I'm in New York. Where are you calling in from?
I'm back home in the UK for another couple of days. We join up next week to start a little rehearsing before we hit the road in Europe.
Where in the United Kingdom are you? What area?
I'm about 40 miles to the west of London.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
if you think of London, 20 miles to Heathrow, another 20 miles to me. Yeah.
I had
So
a
you know,
chance to I had a chance to go to London a couple of years ago for the first time, and I took my 16-year-old son with me, and
yeah.
I was just blown away by the city.
Did you bring lots of money with you? Because it's
Yeah.
not cheap.
And I happened to be there when England was in the World Cup. I was there during one of the games,
Ah,
and
cool.
the
Yeah.
excitement that just
Different
resonated
vibe,
throughout
isn't
the
it?
streets.
Yeah, different vibe. Yeah.
And it's I grew up I was born in New York City, and it's really the only place I've ever been to that kind of still had that New York City vibe to it. You know, that just
Yeah, it's a happening place. Yeah.
It definitely was a
Uh,
happening place.
yeah, but by the same token, I love being in your city for a few days as well. You know,
Yeah.
I do look forward to when we get to hang out in New York for a couple of days between shows. That's always great fun. Great restaurants, great clubs, great things to do. Yeah.
How
From
young were
overall,
you how young were you when the first time you got to New York City?
uh, first time it would have been in late '68. I would have been 20. Yeah.
Okay. And
Just yeah, I mean 20 in a few months. Yeah, that was great because anyway, everybody when you were working straight off the coast because it was all down in Greenwich Village anyway, in the Fillmore and you or the Bleecker Street places. It was just one long party all the time. I don't think I slept for about 4 days. Just go from one place to another.
you don't
Fabulous.
sleep in New
As a
York.
kid,
No.
as a kid you can do that.
Yeah. Nobody sleeps in New York. It's
No, what's the point?
24 hours.
Boring. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, the Village is still a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of those clubs are gone, but
Yeah.
there's still a lot of new places, and there's still music happening in New York. And like you said, the
Yeah.
food is
Yeah.
amazing.
The choices are wonderful, yeah, and the quality, yeah.
Yeah. And it's
Anyway,
a lot of people don't realize it, but it's a very friendly place. People are very friendly here in New York City.
yeah,
And
I've never had a problem. Never had a
yeah,
problem in New York at all. Even back in the day, oh, never a problem at all.
sure. All right. So listen, we're here today to celebrate Deep Purple has a new album called
You do?
Equals One.
Yeah.
Now, I was looking at I first of all, I want to talk about the song that I've been listening to that I love, but I was on the website, I was on your website, and I had read this thing that says the title symbolizes that despite the growing complexities in the world, everything is simplified down to unified essence, everything equals one. And then there was full meaning to be revealed. So, Mr. Ian Pace, are you ready to do some
Yeah.
revealing?
Well, the idea was for me and Gillen, and to be honest, he's the only one who can be bothered to work out album titles, so we just leave it to him. Uh, and he's never really explained it to us properly, so I think each one of us has our own opinion what it might be. To me, I simplify it down this way. Forget all the big algebraic equation and stuff. That's beyond me anyway. I can add two and two and four, make four, and that's about it. To me, I look at it this way: the important things around us, there's only one of. We only have one sun. We have one planet. We have one life. And the one, you, what you do with that is the most important thing. You can make it better. You can make it worse. It's down to the one. You. You're one. I'm one. There's no other ones of us. So that's the way I look at it.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it. That's just great advice. It's what you do with your own life, how you interpret it, your
That's
perspective,
right.
and that's what
That's
art
the
is
way I.
really.
That's the way I see it.
So, the new lead single is called My Portable Door. And that's a great title, great
And
song.
we did it before that movie came out. So somebody must have, two guys in different parts of the world must have heard this sentence and come up with different ideas. Yeah, it's it's a nice track. It's one of the more immediate tracks for grabbing people's attention, um, and it's about how much rubbish there is spoken and done in the world, and how you can get very easily bored with somebody spouting all this nonsense at you. So like most Gillan's lyrics, they're pretty clever. They're not straight up and down rock and roll tunes. There's generally a little subtext in there which makes you think a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I read the lyrics. Listen, I grew up in the 60s and 70s when people brought albums and you opened them up and you read the lyrics while you were listening to the vinyl.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and that's a completely different experience from listening to it on an iPhone or in a car. I mean,
I know. Yeah. Also, when in the DVD times, trying to read the liner notes on that 5-inch square piece of thing was
yeah,
very difficult.
it,
The
it
pictures made no sense. The writing was too small. There was a magic about the vinyl times. I think that's why it's coming back as well. I think that people want to be connected with it.
yes,
If you're going to put a record on an album, you've got to physically do something. You've got to put it on the turntable. You've got to place the needle. You've got to make sure there's no dust on it. You're part of it then. Rather than just pressing play on your iPhone or your, digital machine, there's no connection there. So I think a lot of kids now are going, this is really cool. I'm actually doing something and I'm getting rewarded with the music. I think that's rather nice.
yeah, because you become it's an experience now. It's not
Yeah,
just having, you know, iPods in your head in your
yeah, yeah,
ears. It's you're experiencing the album by
yeah,
looking at the pictures. I mean, think of an album
yeah,
that you
yeah,
looked at hundreds of times. You looked at the same picture hundreds of times.
yeah, yeah.
Just brings you into the
Yeah,
moment.
but also, people are listening to music by themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. But the real fun is listening to music with your friends. So when it's in a tiny little pair of headphones,
Hmm.
it's a bit solitary. When we used to get a new record, there'd be 5 or 6 of us get together in a room and play the thing as loud as we could, and just, wow, listen to that.
Yeah.
And you get that communal, emotion about it. It's sort of different now. But maybe we're just a pair of old farts. I don't know.
It's possible. It's possible. But there was always something about turning people on to music, saying, "Hey, look
Yeah,
at this new album I have. You know,
yeah,
check this out,
yeah,
or check
yeah.
out this
That's
new
right.
band."
Yeah, the information went round. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So you have this new record out, but you also have a new guitar player in the
Yeah.
band, Simon McBride. Now, I've read that he is now an official member of Deep Purple.
Hmm.
What does that mean? What does official member mean of the band?
Um, well, we're a democratic outfit. You know, luckily with 5, we always get a decision. His vote is as valuable and as important as any one of the rest of the 4 of us. So we knew very, very quickly. I mean, we had an impossible situation with our friend Steve Morse. He had this tragedy in his family, and he couldn't be on the road. Family comes first.
Mm.
And we were in that situation where we couldn't turn around to promoters and say, look, we might do a tour in the summer. You want to book it now? We'll let you know later. Nobody's going to go for that, you know. Um, so Steve had his situation, and we knew at this stage of our lives and careers, if we stopped and waited for him, probably wouldn't get going again. It would probably be the end. You can't take a year, 2 years off. Not now. It's not like being 21 again. It's not the same. So we had this impossible situation, both him and us, and we decided that we had to continue. Uh, now, Simon had worked with Don Airy before, and I think he'd done some work with Ian Gillan before on their own solo projects. And they just said, this guy is great. He's just going to fall straight into the ethos of the band. So I said, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. And within, I don't know, half an hour of just jamming around together on the first day, it was obvious. Not only was he good enough, he was his own man, while at the same time paying respect to some of the stuff that had come before he was there. But it was great fun playing when it still is. I think he sounds like he's all over. He's, if I say it's like a breath of fresh air, that's not to deny Steve's genius and his input for the last 20 odd years. It's just different, and sometimes a change of direction is very important, you know. And I think Simon has given us that. He's brought a more riffy approach to the songwriting. Some of Steve's stuff was far more cerebral. You had to really work out where he's got a wonderful mind, Steve. He thinks of things that nobody else can come up with, and they're beautiful, or they're clever, you know. Simon it's a little more. I get it straight away, you know.
Right.
And that is nice because, you know, again, it's just a slight change of direction. Nothing we haven't done before, but if anything, it harkens back to some of that stuff from the early 70s. You know, it's riff based. You know,
Sure.
it's riff based, or it's got a beautiful top line which leads into something. You know.
Well, Steve Morse had all that time that he spent with the Dixie Dregs and his own
Yeah.
band. So he's a complex player, and there's a lot of different styles there. But um,
Oh yeah.
I think what's interesting is, first of all, Simon's age. He's much younger than everybody in the
Yeah. Yeah.
band. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming that might also make for some interesting conversation, about many different things.
It's funny, you know, once you get to a certain age, I mean, when you're 10 years old and there's a kid next to you 3 years old, that's a massive difference. When you're 20 years old and he's 10, it's still a massive difference. When you're both adults, the differences aren't that great, you know. He's married with kids, you know, I'm married with grandkids. I've done that, and I'm that generation ahead of him. But that never crops up, you know. We are there to have fun with our lives and hopefully make some nice music, make ourselves happy, and hopefully make a lot of other people happy too when they see and hear it. And that's as far as it goes. I mean, the age thing never crops up. You know?
Well, the response
I
has
think
been
if he was 20 years old, that would be a big difference. But
sure.
he's far enough along in his life that it doesn't seem to matter, you know. So far, it hasn't anyway.
So what do you say to like someone like Simon about, or do you say anything about what his approach should be to the older material? I mean,
We don't have to tell him anything. What he inherently knew was that there are certain parts of the old songs, the guitar parts, which they're more than solos. The intros and outros are part of the composition. They're as important as the lyrics for that song are. And he automatically respects it and did it. We never had to tell him that you have to start the Highway Star solo like that. He just did it. And then he has the freedom to go off on his own for the middle part of it, and then the obvious signals to come back out of it into the song. It didn't have to be told. He understood it straight away.
right.
In the same way Steve did. Steve understood that too. And it's, you know, a lot of guys sort of say, well, I'm not going to play that because it's not mine, man. You know, he did it. I'm going to do something different. It's very, very hard to take that approach when you've had an incredibly successful song that's been around 40, 50 years. It's what people expect to hear. Not all the way through, but the setups and the get outs, they have to be that way.
Right, because people will sing the solos just as much as they will the melody.
Exactly, you know.
You've heard it so many times.
Yeah, it's a respect thing, but a natural understanding, which I always found working with really great musicians. You don't need to tell them anything; they understand it. You know,
Sure.
it's the ones that aren't quite so good generally have problems like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe self-defense, maybe false ego, whatever. But the really good guys never care. They just know what to do. You know, just know what to do.
So let's stay on this topic of everything being new here. You're going out on tour,
Yeah.
right? So now,
Yep.
how do you decide how many songs to play from the new album on tour? Is that a tough decision?
Oh, it's the hardest thing we ever have to do when we go on the road, because you know you have that nucleus of classic mega songs that if you didn't play, the audience would be very unhappy. So you've got to balance that with how much time have you got on stage. You know, when it's your own show, you have a little more leeway, but even that's getting tighter and tighter as, you know, time limits on live shows become more and more condensed. You know, you're lucky if you can get 2 hours. You know, you really are. So you've got this balancing act between those songs that you know you have to play. Nothing wrong with that. You know, people say you played Smoke on the Water how many thousand times? Are you bored? No, because the audience have a great time with it. You bounce off them. But I think there's so many strong tracks on this record. I'm sure we're going to try and get 4 or 5 in. Luckily, they're quite short at the moment, so we might be able to do it without losing too much of what's been before. It's going to be a balancing act. It always is. But also there's other thing. Just because they work great in the studio doesn't mean that every track's going to work great on stage. You don't know till you try it. You know, audience reaction. That's what tells you whether it's connecting or not. And you know that within 2 nights of playing it. And if you're getting a reaction, right, you stick with it. If it's sort of falling a bit flat, well, there's always something else to play. You know, the idea is that at the end of that hour and 40 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is, those people go home saying, that was great, I really enjoyed that, and I like those new songs. You know, right. That's the important thing. You could just, playing the nostalgia trip is a very dangerous thing to do. We know lots of bands that just do that. And you get hooked into it. You can't get out. All of a sudden, you are an old band who just plays everything from that period of time. I don't put them down for doing it because a lot of them aren't making new music. So that's what it is. That's what they got. We are trying to make new music. We never expect those records to react in the same way as the old ones did because records are a different animal now. You know, you used to tour to sell a record. Now you sell a record to boost your tour. It's gone complete reversal. You know,
that's very interesting.
And that's the reality of the world we've got now. You know? But I think it's important if you can that you should still try to create new stuff. You know,
just as an artist itself, I mean, it's rewarding.
Your own sanity. You know, this is what we do. It's what we always did. So why would you stop part of what made it work in the first place?
Yeah, you know, I've heard, you know, over the past couple of years, I've heard some pretty big artists say that they're never going to release another album again because they're so unhappy of the way the music business is. But then they go ahead and they still release a new album because I guess it's just their artistic heart that just drives them to create new material.
I mean, if it's inside you and you want to do it, then just do it. And I understand there's a lot of discontent the way the record industry has changed, you know. It isn't what it was. But what are you going to do? Just ignore it and just say, well, I'm not doing it anymore? It's like a kid standing in the corner and stamping his foot to me. You know, If you can do it, you should. It doesn't matter if you don't sell 1 million records. So long as it keeps you in the public eye and allows you to keep working on stage, because that's it. That's the magic of doing what we do. Making records is fine and dandy. Being on stage is what it's all about. You know, and when you get to a certain age, you realize that day when you won't be able to do it anymore gets closer and closer. So value every day you can get on stage and have fun with your friends. And if a new record keeps that going for another year or two, well, that's fine with me.
Yeah, it seems, you know, I spoke with Kenny Wayne Shepherd, I guess, a year or two ago, and he went down south and he was interviewing all these blues musicians who were like in their 80s and 90s and still playing. And it just seems to be something as a musician, you just don't stop if you can physically still be able to play the instrument.
That's right. Well, B.B. King, he was playing till a few days before he couldn't play anymore. You know?
Yeah.
But actors are the same, you know. We look at actors and we see a movie of them 50 years ago and they're really young and we see him like, oh, he's an old guy there, but he's still doing what he does or she does because that's what they do, you know. This belief that age is that really important. I don't know it is for anything artistic. If it's still inside your heart to do it, and you can do it, then why on earth would you stop? Could you stop to do it because it made you happy? It made you feel good doing what you wanted to do. So why would you stop it?
I think that's what
You know?
separates artists from everybody else who have certain retirement ages or look forward to
Mm.
retirement, where artists just don't look forward to retirement because it's who they are.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine nothing worse than being locked into a job of, say, 40, 50 years that I didn't like, but knowing I couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
That's going to be like, to me, that'd be like a living hell. Now, a lot of people have to do that, you
Yeah.
know?
Sure.
Um, so I never forget the blessing I have of, A, having found something I enjoy doing and finding I can do it. But I never disrespected it, man. I always understand what I have now could be taken away in an instant, just
Sure.
gone. You know,
So breath
take
by breath,
always
moment by
respect.
moment.
See so many young bands. They're on the road for a couple of years and they get successful. All of a sudden, it explodes, and there's nobody there to say, "Look, come on, let's keep it together." No, the egos get in there, and something which could have been there for 20 years is gone. Never disrespect success, man. It's the hardest thing in the world because if you chase it, you never find it. It'll come up. It'll tap you on the shoulder from behind.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm here. And it can run away again if you don't treat it right.
And each other, I guess, in the band. I mean, the friendships that you have in the band have to be extremely important. You want to spend time together,
But
I would assume.
yeah, they are. They are initially when you're kids, of course. Yeah, it's the first time around. All of a sudden the world is changing, and 6 months ago nobody knew who the hell you were, and now quite a lot of people know who you are and sort of like you. And okay, some of them want things, but it's just a different thing, and you have to deal with that. Um, and for those first couple of years, yeah, you are living in each other's pocket. That's all. That's just the way it is because you're the only social circle you got. It's you against the world. A little later, when you've been around the world a few times, you understand that you're together for the music, but you don't actually need to live in each other's pocket. There are times when we're on the road that we'll be in a night off in a town somewhere. There's nowhere to go, so you eat in the hotel. Somebody will see five of us in there, but at different tables. Doesn't
Hmm.
mean say we don't like each other. Just you want to do that, I want to do this.
Yeah.
So you do sort of grow out of that first time round syndrome, and you get used to it. You just find a way that makes it work for you, and whatever makes it work for them, that's cool too. So you get very flexible about how this works for everybody on the road, so they're just happy. Happy, happy, happy. That's the secret of it.
Sure.
Enjoy everything.
Right. Right. So let's talk about the tour a little. Who else is on tour
Yeah.
with you?
It changes from country to country.
Okay.
I generally don't get involved with it. The only time I will stick my 2 cents worth in is if it's somebody I say don't like. If I don't think it's the right formula for a night's entertainment. Usually I just go with is it going to work well? Are they nice guys or nice ladies? Because that's real important too. And there are certain bands that have a reputation of being sweethearts, and they're going to be a pleasure to work with, and it's all going to swim along wonderfully. And there are other guys problems. Well, let them work with somebody else. Because it should just be a pleasurable experience, the whole thing. No matter who's going on first or who's going on last, you're there doing the same gig. Just make it work together. So I don't get involved in that. But the only time is if it's somebody I don't think will be helpful to a tour. So half the time I don't know. It's only when I get to a country tell me, these guys, fantastic. I haven't seen them for 2 or 3 years, and you go and have a drink and you shoot the breeze for a little while. That's great. I'm very uninformed about most of the stuff we do because I'm really not that interested. I'm interested in getting there, playing, being as good as I can, and the rest of it, I try and keep my life as normal outside of it as much as I can because it's nuts. the circus when you're working is nuts around you. So, and I know it's nuts, which is okay. When you don't know it's nuts, then you get into
Right.
trouble. When you think it's normal, and you think there's everything being done for you, and all the little perks you get, you've got to remember that it's grown up Disneyland. That's what it is.
So
And you've got to
basically,
come back to reality whenever you can.
sure, sure. I mean, how often do you enjoy touring? Do you like doing it all year long? I mean, do you need a break? What's your approach to
Um,
touring?
yeah, I don't mind if we tour 6 months a year. I'm quite happy with that. you know. But I do have an extended family now with grandkids, and I like to spend good time with them. Uh, yeah, I see. I don't believe you can do it 12 months a year and do it properly. I think you do need those little recharge periods where, in my case, I just switch everything off. I don't see a drum kit. I don't practice. I just go and do other stuff. Because what I do on stage, I can't practice anyway. I can sit in my little studio there and bash drums for a couple of hours a day. Not like being on stage.
Sure.
If I get bored, I can come get a cup of coffee. If I'm on stage, I've got to make sure I get through those 2 hours and do it properly. So it's totally different discipline, different power output, everything's different. I can't practice out at home.
Right.
Just
It's
can't do it.
completely different being on stage and than being
Yeah,
at
yeah,
home.
yeah,
It's when you're on stage, there's this element of a live audience and all that's going on. It has to
yeah,
be automatic with what you do. Because
yeah, yeah. And the ability to understand that not everything is going to work out brilliantly.
yeah,
Because on stage you take chances. Why wouldn't you? It's for that moment in time. Well, it used to be before the advent of mobile phones, uh, which you can record everything. So you do take chances, and if they come off 90% of the time, that's great. But there's always going to be that one drum fill where you just get totally lost and just pray to God you could find the one beat. You know, the thing that's something you generally don't do in the studio, but on stage you can have that bit of fun, and that you can't practice that. You can't practice those moments of wonder. They come, and hopefully you get them right. But sitting by yourself, going through a bunch of rudiments, no, 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 no.
yeah.
I'd go as crazy as you would.
Well, that's the excitement of the live performance because you have you like you
Yeah,
said, now everybody has cell phones, but in the old days, especially if you were playing in a smaller venue or in a club or something, and you tried something didn't work out, you just kept smiling, right?
yeah,
And
right. Yeah, yeah. Would you rather I didn't try it? No,
yeah,
you want me
yeah.
to try stuff.
But
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's just that's just the nature of being a musician in live performance
yeah.
is
Or it
that's
should
what
be.
it's about. I've always
Yeah.
found recording in the studio is much more difficult because everything has to be, I guess, as perfect as you possibly can get it. Where I mean,
Well, you're making immortality.
yeah,
Whatever you record, that's going to be around a long time after you ain't, and that's the benchmark to which you're held. So you'd like to leave as good as a repertoire as you can of what you can do in the studio. Uh, but if you can add a few really good live recordings to that as well, I think that's the balance you need. So you can see the precision you need in the studio with maybe the imagination and the fire that you need on stage because they are totally different. In the old days, analog recording was a little freer. The sounds were not that distinct. If you go back to the wonderful big band stuff and early rock and roll, you didn't hear each instrument. You heard a wash of sound.
oh, there you are. You froze up there for a minute or two.
Sorry, man.
That's okay.
Where did you lose me?
Well, we were talking about the big band sounds.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it
So
reminds
in,
me of
in
those.
in those days, yeah, yeah, in those days, they were the musicians were positioned in the studio
Yeah,
and like one or two microphones, and they balanced it that way. So you got this wash of sound, glorious wash of sound. And the same thing was happening in early rock and roll. Same thing. They were the great musicians positioned right, and it was a natural balance. Modern recording is not like that. Everything is precisely captured individually, and of course, because everything uh, is there to be shot down, if there's one slightest mistake, it just smacks you in the face, and you've got to do it again, or it's got to be caressed digitally. That's the nicest way of putting it.
Yeah.
And so, that ability to be part of a sound gave you more freedom. Now you've got this thing where, sure, you can go over a bit 10, 20 times to get it right. It's never as good as the one that you nearly got right the first time round, which 30, 40 years ago would have been good enough.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's why a lot of people love those the Blue Note label, all those Blue Note recordings that,
Oh,
done in
brilliant.
the 60s. They were all stereo recordings. They just put up two
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mics
Yeah.
and
Great players, which is the real secret. Great players.
yeah, yeah.
And just capturing the moment, not
But
trying
that's
to recapture.
I've always
Sorry.
felt that was what Deep Purple was about. Deep Purple was about a sound of individuals coming together. I mean, the way
Yeah.
the organ and the guitar and the bass and drums, just all kinds of blends together to create this sound.
Yeah. Well, we still record that way. We still do the backing tracks that way, but we are still aware of the actual precision of digital recording now. But we still try and get that feeling between ourselves when we're making the basic backing tracks. We don't layer it like a lot of people do. They cut the bass and they cut the drums and they cut. No, we don't do that. We play it together. It might take a little longer to make it work, but we generally do that before we get to the studio. The studio has to be done quickly. You know.
Right.
I enjoyed the analog days a little bit more because it allowed for more magical things to happen. I think that's the only way I can put it.
Sure.
Now we make perfect sounding records, and sometimes we've lost a little something. You know,
Well, it
I
doesn't
think.
sound like it though. Every time you guys put
I
a new
know.
album out, it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God. There's
Well,
still
we're still
great rock and
playing.
roll.
We're still playing. We're not going through the motions. We still have really good musicians who can do it. Um, and I'm not going to have a go at younger bands because that's not my job, and I shouldn't do it anyway. But what they're being asked to play is a lot simpler, you know. And so I don't see, a couple of great blues players around, but I don't see the next Jeff Beck. I don't see the next Clapton. I don't see the next Blackmore. I don't, you know, what was required then took a lot more skill, and
Yeah.
what's required now is two or three guys all playing rhythm guitars to make a big sound. But virtuosity, yeah, it's almost like a dirty word now, which is
You
a
know,
shame.
I've taught piano for 35 years and I see a big difference in students now,
Yeah,
as opposed to, in the 80s and back then where you had so many great players and everybody wanted just to be great. And it's
yeah,
not like that anymore. It's getting lesser and
no.
lesser for
Yeah,
whatever
because you keyboard,
reasons.
keyboard guys, we had Rick Wakeman, we had tons of guys, John Lord, Don Airy. These guys, yeah, with a different direction. You're talking about concert pianists. They
Yeah.
just chose to become rock and rollers instead.
Yeah.
You know, that's a sort of a different level of musicianship. That's
The
for
bar
sure.
was set pretty high back then. If you
Oh
were, if
yeah,
you
most
were,
of
if
the competition was there.
you were a
You
keyboard
know,
player, the
I
bar,
don't
I
know.
mean, the bar was set high for everybody,
Yeah,
all
I don't know
musicians.
what it was like in New York, but I remember as a kid in the London area alone in the mid '60s, there were 10,000 working bands.
Yeah.
There weren't 10,000 gigs,
Yeah.
so you know you got
Well,
one shot at it. If you were no good, you didn't get asked back. You know.
there was a lot of bands. There was a lot of work. I mean, we worked every night in nightclubs doing, mostly cover music, stuff like that. But there was always work. There was always
Yeah.
bands. There was always competition. There was always showcasing, trying to get the gig. That's pretty
When they're
much all
great.
gone.
When they're great. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it really
Yeah.
was. I mean, it was very competitive and you had to be as good as you possibly can
That's
be.
how we learned. That's how we learned. We saw other guys playing every night. Maybe you were going on after them, maybe you were going on before them, uh, or you may be there the next night. But you saw something that you didn't know existed. You thought, I like that. I'll tell you, and it doesn't matter whether that's drums or guitar or whatever, keyboards. You saw somebody else who could do something that you hadn't thought of, and all of a sudden your horizons got much bigger. You start taking from lots of different people. That bit, that's great. That bit, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could do that. Oh, I can do it. you know. But you need to see other guys playing to do that.
Yeah.
And if they're not there, that whole process slows right down.
And that's what's happened, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But thank goodness for Deep Purple, still putting out great
Well,
rock and roll records, still
yeah, we're going to
touring.
keep kicking as long as we can, man. And
And
I say we're already.
you're coming to my town soon. Well, in
Yes, we
September,
are looking forward to it a lot.
Jones
Looking
Beach.
forward to it.
I see you're on September 1st, Jones
Yeah,
Beach.
yeah. I hope it's a nice warm night.
Yeah, yeah.
And no rain.
As long as it's no full moon, no high tide.
Yeah, yeah.
I've seen
All that
concerts there
stuff.
where I've stood in like a foot of water,
Yeah, no, yeah, yeah. It's not the most luxurious venue, but it can have a great atmosphere when it's right.
Yes, yes. Well, Ian, I really want to thank you. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you today. And
Thank you, man.
thanks for, continuing to put out new music and
We try.
just being I spoke with a band the other day, Fastball, and the guy said that they were messengers of joy. And I thought, well, that's the best way to describe any great bands, just messengers of joy.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's sort of thing that when you're a kid starting out, that's the last thing you think of. You're just thinking about me, having fun. A little later, you realize that what you've done, the kick on from that is a lot of people lives are more pleasurable because of what you did, and you never knew it until later.
Yeah. And that's
So,
got to feel good.
oh yeah, one of
You
the
know,
best things in the world. Yeah,
yeah. Musicians are giving people, especially as you get older. And
yeah, yeah,
thank
yeah.
you for giving it, man.
My pleasure, man.
All right.
I hope we can meet face to face when we get up to Jones Beach.
Yeah, maybe we can do that. That'd be cool.
Okay.
All right. Well, good
Take
luck
care.
with everything, and I'll see you next time, man.
Cheers,
All
man.
right. Take
Bye
care,
bye.
buddy.
Thanks a
Bye
lot.
bye.
Very nice. Very nice talking to you.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye bye.